Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and absolutely delighted that you are joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in our mission by telling all of your family and friends that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Audible, Castbox, Player FM, Boomplay, Ghana, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have three wonderful guests for you today. First up, the author and the illustrator of the Book of Belonging, Bible Stories for Kind and Contemplative Kids. Our guests would be Mariko Clark and Rachel Eleanor. And later in the show, we'll be welcoming back Teacher Terrel, telling us about her wonderful Once Upon a Dance children's book series. Hey, my friends, we are really excited of Reading with Your Kids podcast is returning to the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, November 9th and 10th at the Stevens Convention Center in Rosemont, Illinois. Let your imagination come to life at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, the ultimate family play experience. Dive into hands-on fun with the hottest new toys and games, meet the inventors behind your favorite products, and even get a sneak peek at what will top holiday wish lists this year. From interactive play zones to exciting competitions and exclusive giveaways, there's something for every member of the family at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair. And don't miss the Young Inventor Challenge, where kids showcase their creativity and innovation. Who knows? You just might meet the next big inventor. Join us at the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center in Rosemont, Illinois, November 9th and 10th. Whether you're a game enthusiast or just looking for a fun weekend with the family, the Chicago Toy and Game Fair has it all. And like I said, the Reading with Your Kids podcast will be there, and you may have a chance to be heard on the show. Get your tickets today and bring the magic of play to life. Visit shytag.com for details, and be sure to use the discount code READ, R-E-A-D, at checkout to save on tickets. My friends, I am really looking forward to this conversation. We are going to be speaking to the author and the illustrator of the Book of Belonging, Bible Stories for Kind and Contemplative Kids. Please first welcome to the show the author, Mariko Clark. Mariko, how are you?
I'm doing so well. And Jed, if you'd like, you can call me Mari. Sometimes that's a little easier and quicker for us all.
Sure, Mari. And joining us from Atlanta is the illustrator, Rachel Eleanor. Hey, Rachel, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's lovely to be here with you.
Yeah, let's start with Mari. Tell us about the book, please.
So the book is a collection of Bible stories that many families, tend to use with their kids for quiet time. And there's 42 stories, Old and New Testament. And what makes ours a little bit different from maybe what you would have seen in the market is we had a focus on contemplative practices, which is like mindful practices, bringing kids down out of their head into their heart and their body as they're reflecting on their relationship with the divine. And we also had an eye towards inclusion and diversity in the way that we chose the stories and the characters that we focused on. Our book has more female-centric stories than any other story Bible on the market. We really wanted to highlight some of the amazing women in Scripture. So that's sort of our little spiel for the Book of Belonging. And Rachel has done such an incredible job pulling those values into our illustrations as well, that you'll see bodies of all shapes, sizes, colors, abilities in the illustrations in the crowds. She's highlighted pregnant bodies and breastfeeding bodies. There's a lot of really beautiful diversity there.
That's really wonderful. Rachel, Mari's saying, that your book is really female centric and sharing a lot of those female centric stories. To be honest, the women in the Bible seem a whole lot more courageous than most of the guys.
Wow, I don't know if I would need to do a full-on analysis, but I would say that I think it does take a great deal of courage to survive, thrive, care for others, be in the female body, particularly during that time period. So I would say, yeah, just base level existing requires a great deal of courage and knowingness. So yeah, I think I can soft agree with that.
No, absolutely. No, I'm when I first started, I went to a Jesuit high school where they encouraged us, unlike a lot of Catholic schools, that don't encourage you to read the Bible for yourself. The Jesuits encouraged me to read the Bible and the Quran and a lot of other religious texts.
That's wonderful.
And, just pointed out that there were these really courageous women, starting with Mary, who's probably 13, 14, 15, certainly no older than 16. And an angel comes down. First off, seeing an angel, I'd be out of there. No, but to hear that God is going to do this amazing thing with you, I don't know if I could have handled that at that age, which is probably why an angel didn't come down to me.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Rachel has a pretty special relationship, I would say, with Mary's story. I feel like we've talked about that in other interviews, how you sort of ended up bonding with Mary as a character.
Absolutely. Mari really highlighted that sense of bravery, also the sense of this young woman really having to treasure tiny moments, emphasizing her having a difficult life and that, a beam of sunlight or a beautiful trinket or something could be these beautiful moments in what was a pretty tough existence. And becoming a mother during the process, and through re-engaging with the story, it made me encounter Mary in a new way when before she'd felt pretty two-dimensional to me. She's just so commercialized or is a prop. Often in my tradition, she isn't as highlighted, the tradition I came from. And yeah, I suddenly deeply connected with her throughout the entire New Testament. And yeah, absolutely emphasizing that sense of shock and fear and the courage that it must have taken to kind of surrender your body and your life and say, okay, during a time when that could be death, that could be ostracization, her saying yes to that. And then, releasing her son to celebrity, to divinity, to sharing him with the world and then losing him publicly and getting him back. I thought a lot about the relationship, and in the illustrations I have tucked this hidden link between, it's right there. It's not hidden. I show her wearing a bracelet, when the angel arrives, to her. And then later on in Jesus' ministry, you see him wearing that bracelet. And I love this idea of this token between them and this, him carrying his mother's love and bravery with him.
Very cool. Very cool. Mari, what inspired you to put this book together?
It started with one of my kids, actually, as many wonderful projects do. My daughter, Ada, it was a couple of years ago now, we were hanging out one day and she asked me, does God love boys more than girls? And I'm like, what? Where did that question come from? Why would you think that? And she went on to tell me that the story Bible that we had at our house had only 2, what she called girl stories, and then the rest were boy stories. So she kind of just, drew that conclusion as kids do. And I went home to kind of fact check her, looked through the book that we had, and sure enough, only 2 of the stories had a female main character, one being Mary, and another in the Old Testament. And I was a little surprised. And so I ordered the top 8 story Bibles off of Amazon, and I went through page by page with my little sticky note, and I kept stats. And even being, I was raised Christian, and even having that knowledge of sort of the the skew towards masculinity in scripture, I was still really surprised. Only 7% of the stories on average in these top 8 story Bibles on Amazon had a female-centric character. 19% of the stories had a female mentioned. And when I say mentioned, I mean like wife, daughter, mother. I'm not even talking about their name being used. And then 23% of the pages had a female depicted anywhere on the page. And like I was looking through these, zoomed out crowds with my little magnifying glass trying to find women. And it was just beards and beards and beards everywhere. So I wanted something better. I wanted something different for my daughters. And at the time I was pregnant with my son. And I just thought like, I don't want him growing up with this representation in his stories. Like in kids literature, we often say, if they can see it, they can be it. And I'm like, if I want my daughters to follow Jesus and to speak with authority about truth and about justice, then I want them to see I want them to see women in these pages doing the exact things I want them to do and I want for them. If I want them to know that they have just as much Holy Spirit in them as their brother does, I want them to see that. So that's sort of where it started. We launched on Kickstarter in 2021, actually, and it pretty quickly got picked up by the internet. We found out there was more than just, Rachel and I and our friends who were looking for a book like this. It turns out there's thousands of families out there looking for a resource like what we were looking to create. So we raised our money and we pretty quickly found a literary agent and signed a book deal with Penguin Random House. And so our Kickstarter copies ended up sort of becoming a special edition that we released last month, actually, to the people who first supported us. And the feedback has just been incredible, hearing from people that it is just something they had been longing for their children, but also for themselves as well, sort of, healing some of the more harmful narratives that they had ingested, either explicitly or implicitly from the resources they had growing up, and now handing down to their family something new and something more focused on their values just meant a lot to them. So we're really anticipating some more excitement and feedback around the release of what we call the trade edition, but like the book that will be on shelves in stores at the end of this month, at the end of September. So we're pretty excited to see that.
Wonderful. Rachel, how did you and Mari connect and first come?
Mari was bold. She was brave. She sent a cold email to our mutual friend, Scott Erickson, who is a phenomenal artist, painter, performer, and he's well known in our sphere for working on creating this new library of sacred iconography for people of the church and just in their spiritual practice. And he and I have been buddies for a long time and chatted. And so when she reached out to Scott and he was, his schedule was too full, he said, actually, you should maybe reach out to my friend Rachel. So Mari sent me an email and I sent her one back, and the rest is history. And now we're dear, dear friends, and have only been like in the same space together. I mean, less than 10 times, we most of our interaction has been over screens.
That's really amazing, and that this started as a sort of as a self-published project that was picked up by a traditional publisher. That's unusual, and I know from speaking to a lot of art directors and publishers, they don't typically like artists to work together and talk to each other and bring the art to them. They like to sit back and kind of be in charge of things from the beginning.
Oh yeah, Mari's and my relationship was quite unusual because often it's a finished manuscript that's then passed on to the illustrator, whereas I was meeting with Mari as she was writing her first drafts. So I was there helping listen to her ideas and saying yes, no, or try again. And then I was sketching at the same time, and she was having visions for certain spreads. So it's been very collaborative from the very beginning, which did make design and layout sort of a nightmare, but a very worthwhile one. And I will say, our art director, Lynn, was just amazing. I've already sent her like a huge gift basket, but I'm like, I don't know. Do people like edible arrangements? Lynn, that designer, gets, a pineapple bouquet or something. She was fabulous.
Mari, did Rachel's illustrations, as you were seeing them, as you were in the writing process, did that influence your stories in any way?
Yeah, like Rachel said, we were really collaborative. So yes, her sketches affected the way I was writing, but also Rachel herself is a very talented storyteller. And so I would write a story and I'd kind of read it off to her. And what she does really well is she'll say, like, you know what, I actually feel like you could eliminate this entire paragraph if I make the character's face tell this story a certain way. So she does a really good job, if you flip through the book, of having a lot said in just, the tilt of an eyebrow or the corner of someone's mouth. She's incredible with human facial expression, or even like their posture. So we have this one story where it's Mary, Martha, and their brother Lazarus. Lazarus has passed away. One of the sisters is angry. One of them is sad. They're both expressing their grief in a different way, and Jesus is coming to them and meeting them where they're at in their grief journey. And Rachel did such an incredible job of showing these two different sisters the way that they're expressing their grief, but also Jesus's posture towards them is different for each sister. And it's really cool to see how she captured those expressions and those postures in the illustration. So then I was able to kind of tone back on my storytelling and let the images tell the story, which is really cool, especially as I'm reading these stories with my kids. I have some big feelers in my family, and my kids are able to look at the illustration. And before I've even read that page, they're like, wait, why is she sad? But why is she mad? And so then we're able to have this really beautiful discussion before I've even read the story about grief and how it plays out in our bodies. And then when we're reading the story, there's this deeper level of comprehension and discussion and ingestion for my kids as we're engaging with this Bible story, which is just such a beautiful, almost like an Ignatian way to take in the story of like putting themselves in the character's shoes, which is, what I want for my kids when they're reading Bible, to see like, hey, this is a collection of stories about people who engaged with the divine the same way that I want you to. And here's like their struggles. Here's their bumps in the road. Here's how they processed it imperfectly. And here's how Jesus met them where they were at. And so it's just really cool that Rachel's able to take some of the load of the storytelling, but in such a symbiotic way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that idea of taking that Ignatian approach to scripture. That is something, again, I learned in high school and was reminded of, and from my a former pastor who was just such an incredible man of faith. And one of the things I used to do in my my educational magic shows when I was at a Christian school or Catholic school would talk about the story of Jesus in the boat. In the storm. And I would ask the kids, all right, I want you to just really imagine yourself. You're on this boat. The wind is blowing. You're freezing. It's raining. You're terrified. You're going to die. And your friend is sleeping on the boat. No, chill. What, Jesus, what are you doing? And he speaks the words and it's calm. And I would just leave it and be quiet and think, what would you do if you had been on that boat? And the silence, you know how hard it is to get in an auditorium to be silent, but that would get them all the time.
Wow. I mean, that just gave me chills, like remembering that story that way. Oh, yeah, we did a lot of Ignatian spiritual practice with this book, I'd say. I did a lot for the pictures. I think Mari did a lot in the writing. It's been really meaningful for us.
Yeah, we have these moments sprinkled throughout the book that we call mindful moments, inviting kids into contemplative practice like silence, solitude, and stillness. And depending on the story, we sort of try to tailor the moment to the story. So there's a couple of like specifically Ignatian practices sprinkled in there, like we did sort of a modified examine practice, which is when you think back over your day about the highlights and the lowlights. I'm sure you're familiar with this. And then, bring it to God in prayer. And we did it sort of with a cup of tea. This is at the end of the story of Esther. And it's, instructing kids, put your hand around this cup of tea, feel how it feels warm on one side. Now touch your warm hand to your other hand, sort of like bringing them into their body. And now think back about across your day. Because as you probably know, this story of Esther is the only book of the Bible where God's name is not explicitly mentioned, and any sort of religious practice is not mentioned at all. It's sort of a non-religious religious text. And the rabbinical tradition is that God's name is not mentioned to make the point that even on days or weeks or months when we feel like God is absent from our life, that then we have the responsibility and the privilege to look back on our day and find, in the book we say, where God is in disguise. And so then we give kids this practice of like looking back through this story. Where do you think that God met Esther? Where do you think that God met Mordecai in their journey? And then think back across your day. Were there moments where you felt like God was right there with you? Were there moments where you felt like you were alone? And how can you relate to Esther and Mordecai in the story? But also, how can you bring that into your life? And how is God with you even when you feel alone, type of thing? And so sort of to like bring them into the story, bring them into their body, and create that connection to the divine that stands alone from their story reading with their parents, and build those building blocks for kids to make their faith something that they are responsible for, and that has a sense of resilience to it outside of sort of their parents' beliefs and structures, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm curious, Rachel, what was your favorite story that's in the book?
Oh,
I know I shouldn't ask favorite story like ask favorite kid, but
oh man, that one is really, really tough. Mari, help me out. I'm like, I'm going through the whole table of contents now. Like, I often will reach for Esther because it was hard and strange, but I think maybe probably one of the New Testament stories dealing with, oh, you know what? One that ended up being one of my favorites. I'd say like the whole, like, I would call it triptych of the stories around the crucifixion and then the garden, and the resurrection, like those days, or sorry, crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension. I really love those three stories, and partially because I very much looked at them through the perspective of Mary and through some of the women involved. And I think I dealt with a lot of grief and pain and difficult feelings while working on this book. I had kind of a lot of different weird complications from my pregnancy and postpartum, and was drawing in the midst of that. And so I feel like a lot of that grief was poured into those pictures. Oh, see, but I also really love the prodigal son. And I think I love the prodigal son. That one snuck up on me. I wasn't expecting to love it so much. Mm-hmm. And, also features pigs. I love getting to draw some pigs. So it is hard. It's too hard to pick a favorite, but I'd say some of the ones where I had to reckon with my own grief and pain, and then that got to be sort of expressed through these characters. It just gave these characters new tenderness, a new sense of reality in them. They were no longer stories that were just being spoken over me or that I inherited. They became companions. And those ones, I think, especially really resonated with me.
Well, let's challenge you, Mari, with the same question.
I thought you were going to ask me that, and as Rachel was answering, I was trying to be a thoughtful listener, and also my mind was racing, like, oh no, what am I going to say? I have to agree that the prodigal son kind of snuck up on me too, even though I wrote it, which is so funny. But it was one of those things that, as it was, call it my muse or call it inspiration or whatever, but as it was sort of flowing out of my fingertips, I thought like, oh, this feels really, this feels very soothing, and healing in a way. I think when you take the posture of the two sons, and like, this story's been told a million times from a million different perspectives. But I think so many of us take one posture or the other towards God in our relationship, that we're either striving for our belonging with God, saying like, the older son, like, I worked so hard and like somehow I'm still not your favorite or whatever. Or the younger son, so many of us fall into like a shame pattern of like, I don't really deserve to belong with you. I'm gonna hide from you. I'm gonna hide my face. I'm gonna mumble. and to remind myself as I'm writing to remind children, like, you will always belong with God, no matter what, no matter how hard you strive, or no matter how much you hide, there's always a place for you with God, and you belong with God, and you are beloved of God, not for anything that you've done or haven't done, not for anything you've said or haven't said, but simply because of who you are. Like, that's the message of the whole book. And it felt like I was sort of challenged and also met in the story of the prodigal son. Almost like, do I really believe this thing that I'm saying to kids? And to put myself in the position of these two sons, and then in the position of the father as a parent myself, to think of my two kids coming to me thinking that they either had to work for my love or that they didn't deserve it. It broke my heart, and it healed me all at once, I think. So I think that one did a lot of heavy lifting in my own spiritual stance, but also the way that Rachel illustrated it. She has them living on this vineyard and these beautiful, like, sun dappled vines. And it's very lovely to look at. So I think as a package, it's just really delightful for me.
I'm imagining, my kids are adults right now, but I'm imagining reading this book, and particularly that story, with my kids, and probably would be crying at different points. And I think, parents always complaining, I got to read that book 5,000 times. I think that's a story that you can read from a different perspective and ask your kids, hey, think about what the worker son is doing. Think about what the prodigal son is thinking and being it. Think about the dad. So many different perspectives that and conversations that you can have with your kids.
You're right. I mean, I'm glad that you said that. That's our hope for this story, that, families will have so many different beautiful conversations gathered around these stories. I think that that's one of the gifts that Scripture gives us. We say in the introduction, there's this rabbinical tradition of calling Holy Scripture a gem that gets turned, and that every time someone turns the gem, we see the light sparkle through it in a new and different way, like a prism, and that's a gift. And that's the gift that keeps on giving type of thing, that with every retelling, hopefully these families, these kids, these parents, will take away a new piece of, a new facet on the face of God that they hadn't seen before. And in turn, themselves as image bearers of God.
Rachel, I think the Book of Belonging, it really does give families an opportunity to get into conversations about God. I think a lot of people who go to church every week, a lot of people who just Christmas and Easter, they go through the rituals, they know the prayers, they know the stories, but they don't talk about them. They don't sit down and encourage something that I encourage my kids to do, which is to question, why would God do? Why did that happen? What was God trying to tell me there? And even letting your kids know it's okay if you don't understand why God did that right now. And it's okay if it makes you angry that God did that, but pray that hopefully one day you'll understand. How did you like this process, Rachel? You were mentioning, typically you get a manuscript, which has been written, and then you're told to go at it. How did you enjoy this different more collaborative experience?
I adored it. I think one of the great gifts that came out of this project was finding a creative partner in Mari. We want to continue to work together. I think we bring out each other's best. So that was just a gift, and I've loved that. I think getting to be so hands-on with, being a sounding board with Mari about story selection and perspective. I remember we wrestled with Abraham, Sarah, and the woman called Hagar for a long time. And that was one of the last stories I feel like that got buttoned up, because we were really struggling with that one, with the perspectives and the injustice, but it's such a key part of, just all of the Bible. And it was very healing for me after having a lot of church hurt and trauma and having left church to get to be so collaborative in in the storytelling, and being so hands-on in that way was a very healing process. It just gave me a new hunger and appreciation for these stories, and to see them with fresh eyes was such a gift.
Yeah. Mari, I had a weird kind of experience just a couple of weeks ago. I was at an author event, talking about being on podcasts and whatnot. And, somebody asked me, well, what inspired you to, do this? And I told the story of, that I had done a couple of podcasts and they were fun, but they didn't really take off. And then I talked to some consultants and experts, and they say, well, you do a lot of performances in Catholic schools. You should do a Catholic podcast. I was following their lead and I had all these ideas. And just as I was about to hit the button to make that happen, I said a prayer to see if this is what God wanted me to do. And he didn't. And he wanted me to do this. And that was it. I just said that. I'm no big, huge professional fan, but I had people come up to me afterwards kind of whispering, I'm so glad you have the courage to share your faith. And I'm like, what kind of time are we living in that is considered courageous? I don't, it kind of made me sad. I know she meant it to be like, this is great and I should feel good that I did this, but I was kind of sad that, wow, we're living in a time that this is thought to be courageous.
All right. What's your question?
Oh, I don't always have questions.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to be missing it. I think that it's been an interesting process promoting this book for a similar reason. I think that, for so many of us, we want the people that we're speaking to and interacting with to feel respected and loved. And often, I think Brene Brown uses this language. People end up hunkered down in ideological or theological bunkers and end up not being able to have a thoughtful conversation with someone who thinks differently or believes differently than we do. And it often leads to fear that we don't want to express what we think or believe because we either don't want to offend someone on the one end of the spectrum or we don't want to be attacked on the other end of it. But I think exactly like you're saying, there's a way to thoughtfully engage and share about what we think and believe that doesn't over-identify with a certain system, but rather shares our beautiful personal experiences with God. And I think the idea that God is experienceable, is that a word? Yeah. Is pretty integral to contemplative practices like Ignatian practices, and also to the idea that we can tell these stories in different ways, and with each retelling receive something from it. I think talking about it as a personal experience really creates a path for that, as opposed to talking about these bigger ideologies or theologies and whether you subscribe to them or not. It's pretty hard to argue with someone's experience. And I think viewing Bible stories as people's experiences with this divinity that we all have access to, but so often don't share about, I think is pretty special and something that I hope kids take away. And so I hope that speaks to what you're talking about.
I think it does. I think it speaks to it beautifully. We should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about both of you and find out more about the Book of Belonging.
We would love that. Rachel, I feel like I've been talking out. Do you want to do that?
This is the part that always makes me nervous, though. You can find our book, The Book of Belonging by Mariko Clark, illustrated by Rachel Eleanor, hopefully at a bookstore near you. You can go to, I think, is it bookshop.org, and you'll be able to go to the big places, Barnes and Noble, et cetera, et cetera. You can go to Amazon if you want. We're there. But if you can't support your local bookstore, I always say, please try and do that. And you can follow more Book of Belonging stuff by following Mari on Instagram at mariko.clark.
Just Mariko Clark, all one word.
Mariko Clark. I'm rachel.eleanor.art on Instagram, and we have a Substack that we're very excited about. And if you don't know what a Substack is, it's a glorified blogging, RSS feed. It's all of us who are a little burnt out from creating soundbite short form content, and we're hopping over to Substack and telling stories together. And we're doing a lot more chats about the making of the book, each story. I talk about illustrations. We talk about our personal journeys, and we're going to be telling a lot more behind the scenes stories about the book over the next, I don't know, like 2 years, Mari. We've got plans to go through all of the stories. So if that sounds like that'll be a lovely resource for your family when you're reading with your kids, hop on over to Substack.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead, Mari.
oh, sorry. Just to clarify, the Book of Belonging will be releasing wherever you buy books on September 24th, but it's available for pre-order online, or if you were to go to your local bookstore, you could pre-order it.
And will there be a follow-up book?
Our agent was like, so when are we going to talk about the next project? Mari and I have some ideas in the hopper. We don't have a when yet, but we're going to kind of see how this one goes. And I think Substack's going to be that place where we're going to be experimenting with ideas. There are so many stories that did not make it into this book that could go into a future one. Mari and I don't know, we might do something more poetic for grown-ups. That's still very much in the works. She and I are going to need to go on a retreat and think about it.
We've had a really powerful time speaking to the author and illustrator of the Book of Belonging, Bible Stories for Kind and Contemplative Kids. Our guests have been Mariko Clark and Rachel Eleanor. My friends, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jed.
Bye.
Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Join us right now from Seattle in the great state of Washington. Our guest is returning to the show to celebrate her Once Upon a Dance series. Please welcome back to the show, Teacher Terrel. Hey, Teacher Terrel, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Happy to have you back on. I think I shared with you back in your last visit that dance was such an important part of my daughter's life, and of course that meant it was an important part of our life too.
Definitely, yeah. Parent support is so important.
It really is, and it's we didn't see it. And my son might have seen it as a burden at having to attend a 3 or 4 hour dance recital. Those were kind of long.
Yeah.
But I for the most part, we didn't see it as a burden or an inconvenience. It was something that my daughter loved, something that she was getting a ton out of in a real positive way, friendships and certainly the athleticism and the exercise and the confidence. So we were really delighted that she loved it so much.
Yeah, my mom just visited and we watched some of my old videos from 40 years ago, I guess. And, that was fun to see that they'd enjoyed those way back then.
Yeah. So give us remind us about the series and who we're going to meet in the series.
So we have 6 series, the bulk of which are Dance It Out books, and they're kind of one-act plays that incorporate movement and have some connection points as well with the reader and some breath work and things like that. And in those is the option to look at photographs of my daughter, who we call Ballerina Kenora, named after coronavirus. And they're just fun, whimsical stories, and they kind of start with very basic movement like sun, and you're reaching and you're flying and you're doing animal movements up into some pretty heavy ballet. And then we also have a series called Dancing Shapes, and we have some kind of more technical books for older kids. They have a dancing chicken and a dancing cat, and they're very funny and entertaining, but it's, how to stand and how to find your really good posture and a lot of life lessons. for aspiring dancers. And then we have one for older kids called Ballerina Wisdom. And that's all about, it can be applied to anything, but it's those kind of secrets to success from just showing up. And that's such a big part that, people don't understand. It's just, you have to put in the work, all the way to being kind and giving yourself grace and giving others grace. And so just a lot of really good food for thought.
Yeah.
And then one of our latest ones is Ready, Set, Dance coming on for the younger audiences, which is just to get excited for dance class. You join Bella Beak and Quinn Hops as they're nervous about their first day. And Ballerina Katina, takes them on a little tour and shows them how it's done and says, don't worry, it's just all fun. And, nobody knows what they're doing the first day anyway, and teaches them a couple ballet things and dance things in general. And it's just adorable and very sweet. So.
You're obviously passionate about dance, not only for yourself and your family, but for spreading the word. Where does that passion come from?
I think, a lot of this is just being on podcasts and things and doing a little self-reflection and thinking about kind of both my journey in dance and my daughters. And I kept coming back to dance. Every time I'd step away into another career, dance just pulled me back. And just there's so much joy there and there's so much goodness. And I truly believe that dance provides a powerful outlet for kids. I've read now a lot of studies about the benefits of dance. Dance is actually the best form of exercise. And, like study after study is showing that it's good for outcomes, for kids in schools. Like everything goes up, their grades, their attendance, their engagement, their problem solving, their creativity. So there's just like no downside, and why I don't understand why we're not all dancing. And, it's just such a great thing. And from infants and their motor development to neurodivergent children and their functioning and all the way to adults. And it really prevents, a decline. And they found this just study after study. It's like, it's amazing. And so even the more I learn, I was passionate about getting these out during COVID and having the kids have something to do at home. But now the more I learn, the more I'm just really excited for it because it's amazing.
And the neat thing about dance is that obviously you can go to a dance studio and get professional training. But you don't need to buy a $1,500 or $1,800 Peloton to exercise. You don't need to buy weights. You just have to have a space in the floor where you can rock out.
Yeah. Yeah. And dance classes are amazing and they're, collaborative, and you can grow up in a studio and you can learn so many good things there. But you could also just as a parent turn on music, maybe especially if you've got a kid that has trouble sitting still at school, like 3 minutes before you head out the door, a dance party can be amazing. For kids just to kind of get regulated and get that self-control and get a little energy out. And it's bonding, it's a time that you can really share, and having that music on top of it. So you're getting music and you're getting social connection and you're getting that physical activity kind of all layered in one. It's something that even just a few minutes a day can help. You don't even need formal training to reap those benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. I just encourage, if you have a son or a daughter, I know we usually connect dance with daughters and ballerinas and whatnot, but I think it's also incredibly beneficial for boys to get involved in dance.
Definitely. And I know you've traveled around extensively, and you've probably found that there's dance in a lot of different cultures because it is in every culture. Yep,
absolutely. And you mentioned you got dragged back or drawn back into dancing, your different careers. My daughter has started dancing again for fun and recreation and exercise. And I got a feeling I'm going to start dancing again, too, because I had a pretty serious injury and my body still doesn't know where it is in space. And so when I finish PT in a couple of weeks, I think that's what I need to do to kind of get that back together again so I can move around and not fall over.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. Be careful, of course, but, there was a study, again, I'm always reading these studies. There was a study I read recently that if you can balance on one foot for 10 seconds, so if you cannot do that, you're twice as likely to die in the next, I think 7 years, I think it was, whatever it was. It was compelling, whatever it was. And I used to teach, it's funny because I used to teach these little kids, and the first couple times, maybe just even once or twice, it was terrifying to watch, to do this free dance where they're moving through space. And there's something that clicks in very quickly about your self-awareness and, and how others move in the space. And it was really interesting to see that, like, day one, where there was just like, and you're like, it's kind of concerning. And I'm like, okay, like, let's all like, I'm just like kind of terrified and watching, where the kids are moving to so much, and trying to have everyone be careful to, in a few sessions. And they just really have that sense of self and that sense of self space. And, it's just much more comfortable. So it was really fascinating to see.
Yeah. Now, I believe there's lots and lots of great benefits of dance, as I've said here, but there's a couple of drawbacks. Dance and dance studios can be a little, I don't know if the word culty is the right word, but there's some competitiveness, and it's not, there's my daughter, the first studio that she went to, she was on a competition team at age 5, and they did really well, and they won at nationals. And then the dance teacher came back and said, "We're going to Europe for the internationals next year, and your kid's going to be dancing 19 hours a week." And I said, "Absolutely not. Not at 6 years old.
Good for you. Good for you."
It was really hard. And I remember sitting down with my daughter and having a conversation with her about it, and saying, I just don't think it's healthy, that much dance, and it turned out it was the best choice, because the trip to Europe was a nightmare. We kept in touch with a lot of the families that we knew, and there was cattiness and jealousy and arguments, and it was all the mothers started.
Oh my goodness, that's so sad. So yeah, I know. I heard someone say once, like, it's never dance. Dance is only goodness, and it's only good. And it's these things that we put on top of it that are negative experience. And there are those, I acknowledge, that there are some things with body awareness or whatever, and challenges there. And then also the competition element. I have a lot of opinions now that I can look back on 2 lifetimes, and my son also danced. So really 3 lifetimes, and all of their friends, and, and witnessed a lot of different schools and a lot of different places that I taught. And I have some pretty firm opinions now that I am not afraid to share. Huh? And I do, like, on the social media, like when people are posting their 5 and 6 year olds, and I'm like, hey, I just, as you move forward through this, if you choose to put your young child through competition, I'm like, here are some things that, I think you should really watch for, or, focus on, and try to make it a positive experience. I'm not a huge competition fan, and we did competitions, and I think those are great for older kids, but at the younger levels, a lot of, they're not really equipped to handle the pressure. And there's a lot of pressure that takes away the joy of dancing, so there's this inherent joy, and by competing, you're removing that, and you're putting the focus on something else, and you're putting the focus on something that is competitive and not collaborative. And that's the great thing about dance, is that it is so collaborative. It's a non-competitive sport, essentially. So it's a social thing, and we're having, out of COVID, especially here in Washington State, where we were locked down for over 2 years, really. It's really hard to get those social connections back, to get back in the habit of getting off the couch, because it's just so much easier to just sit on your bottom on the couch and watch screens. So, just getting kids in that environment where it's low stakes social connection is something, really, really good for them. And I really, truly believe that. And to just, there's so much good stuff that happens in the studio, but when you're putting a lot of pressure and it's just a different focus than I think kids really need at this point. So yeah. And there's a lot, also I'm a huge advocate for some change in the stories that we tell and the way that we costume our young women. So I have a lot of opinions about that, as well.
Let's share those opinions. Don't tease us.
Well, no, I mean, it's just, taking a step back, I'm just really encouraging people to take a step back and say, would you let your child go to school dressed like this? And if the answer is no, then why are we putting them on stage dressed like this? And these are, it does happen. I've seen these 6 and 8 year olds, dressed really not appropriately, and letting, even the stories that we tell and the messages that we're giving young kids, like say Beauty and the Beast is very popular with my hometown ballet company, and they put that on quite a bit. And if you just take a step back and you think about, okay, what is the story here? It's that she is, kidnapped by someone and then she falls in love with them. And is that the best message for, so just really taking a step back and looking at what is the story that we're telling? How are we clothing our kids? Who are we letting them, for the older kids, who are we letting in the room with them? And how are they treating them physically? And is that really appropriate? So finding the right people to work with these kids as well, is another important aspect. But anyway, that's a whole nother rant, not really related to the books per se, but it's something that I feel really strongly about. And I'm out there, trying to message that and just share and open people's, ask questions and open people's eyes a little bit.
Yes, I absolutely agree. As is demonstrated by our decision with our daughter, there are dance teachers and they are experts in their field, and, but they're not God. You can disagree with your teacher. You can disagree with your doctor. Your kid. And there were times that we were at competitions or, recitals, and there were some costumes that in dance moves that made me uncomfortable. Knowing that kid is 14, and should I really be here? Yeah.
There's no reason for us to all be uncomfortable, and let's make our kids safe and make it a positive experience, make it something they can be proud of, and make everyone feel good. Yeah.
So with your books, these books are great because the kids can, if there's not a studio around, or if a family doesn't have the funds to get into dance, they can they can dip their toes in it with your books.
Exactly. Yeah. And we do have a couple of videos as well on YouTube. These are just they're the stories, told. And then my daughter and another actress, act it out, but they're encouraged to act it out however they want. So they get a little movement in that way too. So and they do kind of, like I said, they start with more accessible movement and then move into a little bit of dance. And then, it really breaks it down and teaches you how to do a gallop or a chasse, and what a leap, you're going to stretch out your leg and then you're going to jump over a puddle and land on the other leg, and up into some more, and then it's a little bit faster paced. But so it's a really nice way to experience a lot of different movement, a lot of different varieties of movement. They're just really fun. And then, and my illustrators have done a fantastic job. We have illustrators from all over the world, and they've created some real magic. And I used to say I wanted a different illustrator on every book, and that just doesn't happen because I go back to the same people over and over again that I really liked working with.
Well, when you find a team that you enjoy working with and creating with, it's a good thing to stick with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about the Once Upon a Dance series.
So either onceuponadance.com, if that's too long. We also have dancestories.com. I'm on Instagram pretty much every day, once_upon-a-dance. And if you look for me on pretty much any social media, Once Upon a Dance, you'll probably find me.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Once Upon a Dance. It's a great series for kids, introducing them to the beautiful world of dance. Our guest has been Teacher Terrel. Terrel, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed chatting.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids, and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, @readingwithyourkids on Instagram, and @JedleyMagic on Twitter. Love for you to visit our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And of course, our website is a fantastic place to visit. That's readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Want to start by thanking our guests, Mariko, Clark, and Rachel Eleanor. Please be sure to check out the Book of Belonging, Bible Stories for Kind and Contemplative Kids. Also want you to thank Teacher Terrel. Please be sure to check out her Once Upon a Dance series. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Rayling Tang. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.